Everyone agrees that Bob Dylan is a top songwriter of the 20th century. He has been making music and enjoying it for about 60 years. Themes of social, political, and poetic immorality appear in many of his lyrics. His life has been the subject of much speculation and rumor, along with the lasting influence of his music. Throughout his life, Bob faced several issues, including his changing religious views, the end of several marriages, the lack of criticism he received, and a pivotal event that prompted him to question himself. Bob Dylan confirms what his fans and critics have assumed. At the age of 84, what will he reveal? We will explore this surprising news in full today. Early life and career. But first, let's take a look at his background and professional journey. Robert Allen Zimmerman was the original name that Bob Dylan's parents gave him. St. Mary's Hospital in Duluth, Minnesota was the site of his birth on the 24th of May 1941. A humble and modest home was his upbringing, and he grew up in it. Beatrice Stone and Abram Zimmerman were his biological parents. They belonged to a tiny Jewish community, and his mother Beatrice was commonly called Beatty. Anna Kyrgyz and Zygmunt Zimmerman, Dylan's grandparents, fled the anti-Jewish brutal attack known as the Pogroms of 1905 from Odessa, which is now in Ukraine. Dylan's family tree is typically traced back to them. The Stone family, Jews from Lithuania, who emigrated to the U.S. in 1902, are Dylan's maternal ancestors, Florence and Ben. His parents raised him in Duluth. Allen, who was 6 years old at the time, was diagnosed with polio. This necessitated a relocation to his maternal family's homeland of Hibbing, Minnesota, a tiny town. Because his family remained in Hibbing for a while, Dylan spent much of his formative years and adolescence here. His dad, Alan, and his dad's brother were the owners of a furniture and electronics shop. During that time, Dylan was introduced to a few gadgets through this company. Growing up in an environment where his father and uncle ran an electronics store had a profoundly beneficial impact on Dylan, who developed a profound appreciation for music via the radio equipment he used. With each passing year, his devotion to music deepened. He was often observed listening to blues and country music for hours on end. All of these things laid the groundwork for his incredible musical career and lasting impact. At this period, Dylan began to show signs of being an exploratory preteen. The rock and roll genre became more appealing to him, and he began to gravitate toward it. He had a deep affection for Elvis Presley and Little Richard. While enrolled at Hibbing High School, Dylan eventually established his band. The Golden Chords was the name of one of the bands he founded during that period. Covers of rock and roll songs by other artists, particularly ones that Dylan liked, were the band's specialty. Rock and Roll Is Here to Stay, by Danny and the Juniors, was one of the songs they played. A school talent show was the setting for this performance. An incident that occurred during this talent event has long been used as a punchline when discussing Dylan's early life. The school administrator entered the arena that day to silence the audience since the volume was too high during the play. Many would agree that this was both hilarious and humiliating, yet it didn't deter Dylan in the slightest from following his dreams. Everyone knew that Dylan followed in the footsteps of his music heroes, Little Richard and Robert Zimmerman, so much so that in his 1959 high school yearbook, he was sarcastically called Robert Zimmerman to join Little Richard. During the same year, he also had a brief performance as Elston Gunn, a character who would play the piano and make clapping noises with Bobby V. In September of 1959, he relocated to Minneapolis after finishing high school. He was supposed to go to Minnesota State University. But Dylan dropped out of college in May of 1960 after just 1 year, since his music was his life, and he was afraid he wouldn't have enough time to devote to it as a student. Then he moved into the fraternity home of Sigma Alpha Mu. Throughout his stay, he became an integral member of the campus folk band and began performing at the 10 O'Clock Scholar, a coffee house near the university. Around this time, his admiration for traditional American folk music blossomed, and he began to veer away from rock and roll in favor of folk. He explained his abrupt shift from rock and roll to folk music in an interview. Even though rock and roll was exciting and full of energy, Dylan claimed that it lacked the seriousness, contemplation, and concentration that he sought. Folk music, on the other hand, gave him the ability to be able to tell stories about real life and express great feelings regardless of what it was about, either feelings of despair, sadness, or hope. Looking at the success story today, there's no doubt that it was this shift in musical preference that set the stage for style, craft, and musical skill. Before this time, he was still referred to as Robert Zimmerman. At this point, he decided to change his name to Bob Dylan. In an autobiography, he stated that initially he had it in mind to use the name Dillian, but decided to coin it rather to Bob Dylan after being inspired by the poetry of Dylan Thomas, a famous Welsh poet. During an interview in 2004, he stated that he believes people are sometimes born with the wrong names at times. So in such cases, it is left for them to decide to either change their identity or name or leave it that way. Dylan moved to New York City in January 1961. A year after dropping out of college, he made this move to be able to properly pursue his music career and possibly make a name for himself, and also visited one of his longtime music icons, Woody Guthrie. Woody Guthrie is a legendary musician who at this point was critically ill and battling Huntington's disease. He was admitted to Greystone Park Psychiatric Hospital where he was taking treatments. Dylan has always mentioned the impact his love and admiration for Woody had on his musical success, and how he had always looked up to him. One of the strangest things about Dylan's connection to Guthrie was the way his songs reflected every facet of the authentic American character. Additionally, he brought up the fact that his music could address the everyday hardships of the average person. Dylan insisted on calling himself Guthrie's greatest disciple at all times. His devotion to Woody Guthrie was genuine. Due to this, he paid Guthrie many visits during his time in New York. Also, he was able to meet Ramblin' Jack Elliott, Guthrie's apprentice, who would eventually become his buddy through this. Dylan found his way about New York City by February 1961. He began doing performances at various nightclubs, particularly in the Greenwich Village area. While he was meeting other artists, he began to network with them and form collaborations, even though most of them were already well established in folk music. Among those he crossed paths with were Odetta, Fred Neil, Dave Van Ronk, and the Clancy brothers. Over time, his exceptional vocal range and performing style earned him widespread acclaim. Robert Shelton, a critic for the New York Times, gave him an outstanding review in September of that year, which was a watershed moment in his life. Robert described Dylan as a unique folk song stylist and praised his performance at Goethe's Folk City in his piece. Significant individuals in the business took notice of Robert's evaluation, which had a profound effect on his life and career. However, Dylan also had success around this time when he played harmonica on the third album by the famous folk singer Carolyn Hester. Producer John Hammond took notice of his exceptional harmonica playing. A signing with Columbia Records finally came for Dylan after a while. Bob Dylan, Dylan's debut album, came out in March 1962. Folk, blues, and gospel songs made up the majority of the debut album. Talk About New York and Song to Woody were two of the original tracks. He dedicated his song Song to Woody to his musical hero Woody Guthrie. He only managed to sell 5,000 copies of the record in its first year, so it wasn't exactly a commercial smash. However, despite being a rookie, Dylan was able to carve out a niche for himself in the business because of this brilliant move. He has a stellar reputation for being a consistent and resilient individual. It has always been clear that he is deeply committed to his music profession, even though his record did not do well in the charts. He formally changed his name to Bob Dylan in August 1962, and in the same month inked a management deal with Albert Grossman, who would remain his manager until 1970. Grossman, his manager, had a reputation for being a harsh cookie in the business world. It seemed like every day he had a new beef with a record label, producer, or another artist. His co-workers were previously aware of his combative personality and problem-solving manner. Released in May 1963, Dylan's second album, The Freewheelin' Bob Dylan, was his biggest break after the first album. This was a significant turning point in his career. It highlighted his skills as a songwriter and his talent as a great artist. This was quite different from his first album, which was mostly covers. It was filled with his original songs, as his pattern has always been. The songs in his album touched on social and political issues faced at that time. One of the hit songs on this second album was Blowing in the Wind. This song became a global anthem for the civil rights movement at that time. It sounded so simple but had powerful lyrics and highlighted questions about peace, freedom, and war. Another hit track on the album was A Hard Rain's Ain't Gonna Fall. This particular track was written during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and Dylan used this song to air his concerns about a possible nuclear war. After the release of this album, Dylan was not just seen as a writer, but rather he became a voice for the young generation as they were able to get socially aware of these issues. One of the profound aspects of his craft was his ability to combine poetic lyrics with his style of folk music. Dylan wasn't accustomed to limiting himself to a single genre, even though he had become famous and established in the music industry during that period. In 1965, he began to switch to electric. He combined elements of traditional music with rock and roll. Bringing It All Back Home, his CD, showcased this transformation. He thought this was a brilliant concept, but his audience didn't share his enthusiasm. When his performance at the 1995 Newport Folk Festival rolled around, he decided to incorporate an electric band into his set. Because he had strayed from traditional folk music, many of his admirers were angry and booed him. Despite the embarrassment, Dylan persisted with his new endeavor. Like Rolling Stone, his new track was already a smash success when he dropped it. Even now, this song is still regarded as one of the best rock songs of all time, and it peaked at number 2 on the US charts. There's no denying that Bob Dylan was a creative, resilient, and endlessly adventurous person throughout his life and work. Everyone who listens to his music feels a profound connection to his style and words. Examining his familial and romantic relationships will help us understand the nuances of his long-awaited confession, his relationship, and love life. When it comes to the history of rock and roll music, the relationships and love affairs that Bob Dylan had are the ones that receive the most attention. Without a shadow of a doubt, the multiple relationships he has maintained have had a significant influence on both his personal life and his professional life. His connection with Suze Rodolo was one of the very first serious partnerships he ever had. It was at the beginning phases of his profession that he began to develop a solid relationship with her. During the period that they were together, he had only begun to make his way in the world of music and had not yet established himself as an artist or found his voice. It was in the early 1960s that they first started an affair. Around the same time that she appeared beside Dylan on the cover of his album, The Freewheelin' Bob Dylan, she began to gain a significant amount of popularity. On the 25th of February 2011, Suze passed away after a protracted period during which she had been afflicted with an illness. When the two of them first began dating, she was just 17 years old. During that time, she was his primary source of motivation, particularly during the initial period that he resided in New York City. Before she passed away in 1962, Dylan and she lived together in a modest apartment on West 4th Street. They made their home there. The majority of the time, Dylan has always alluded to her in interviews and his memoirs. He has always reminisced about how enthralled he was when they first met at the backstage of a certain show. She was his inspiration, particularly for his early love songs, which include songs such as Tomorrow is a Long Time and Don't Think Twice, amongst others. He came up with these songs because of her. Besides the fact that they shared a love connection, she was a significant factor in shaping Dylan's political perspectives and understanding. Her involvement in leftist politics during the period, during which she worked with the Congress of Racial Equality, was one of the most significant sources of inspiration for his politically charged songs. She was also one of the people who inspired him the most. Even though they dated for some time, however, their relationship ended a long time before she passed away. By the end of 1963, he was unable to keep up with the demands of celebrity and the responsibilities that came along with it, while still maintaining his relationship with her. These resulted in several frictions and strains, which eventually led to their breakup. After their relationship ended, she remained in New York City and decided to pursue her longtime dreams of teaching, painting, and illustrating books. By 2009, she was able to publish a memoir titled A Freewheel in Time, which reflected on life in Greenwich Village during the period of 1960s. After Suze, he got into another relationship with someone who happened to be an important figure in his early life, Echo Hellstrom, his high school sweetheart. Echo loved music and was so passionate about music that her love for music made her introduce Dylan to many prominent figures and singers in the industry. There were speculations that his famous song Girl from the North Country was inspired by Echo and the romantic relationship they shared. After that, Dylan began a relationship with Joan Baez, who at the time was considered to be the most influential figure in the folk music world. While Dylan and Baez did have a romantic relationship, they also had a deep bond as music collaborators. This partnership was the foundation of their relationship. The year 1961 marked the beginning of their partnership, which lasted for some time. However, before 1965, there were reports of their split. The majority of people assumed that Dylan's transition to electronic music was a significant factor in the collapse of the band. It was also mentioned that Baez had the impression that he was alienating himself from her as a result of his shift in the musical genre. Even though they had officially ended their relationship, they continued to be close friends and continued to work together and form partnerships. It is important to note that both of them played significant roles in their careers. And it is also important to emphasize that Dylan would not have been able to make the successful transition into electronic music if Joan Baez had not appeared in his life. Many people believe that Baez's lengthy and successful career may be traced back to the time when she first met Dylan. In the course of an interview, Dylan expressed complete and utter sorrow for how he had treated Baez throughout their relationship in the year 2002. In addition, this was around the time that the public television documentary titled Joan Baez, How Sweet the Sound was brought out. Dylan tied the knot for the first time with Sarah Lowndes, and the couple went on to have 4 children together: Jesse, Anna, Samuel, and Jacob. The adoption of Maria, Sarah's daughter from a previous marriage, was another example of Dylan's commitment to a mixed family. So much so that Sarah made an appearance in Dylan's film Ronaldo and Clara. Unfortunately, in 1977, they divorced, which brought an end to their marriage. He created songs that portrayed his wish for a secure home life, coupled with his restless spirit when they were together. These songs were written throughout their time together. Significant hurdles were presented to their relationship as tensions increased over house upgrades and Dylan's drinking habits. These problems revealed underlying concerns that ultimately led to the couple's decision to withdraw from each other. Even though Sarah continued to play a significant role in Dylan's life, she was the source of inspiration for several songs that represented both the joy and the problems of their marriage. Dylan began a romantic involvement with Carolyn Dennis, his backing vocalist, not long after the dissolution of his marriage to Sarah. After some time had passed, they tied the knot. But this fact remained a well-guarded secret until the publication of Down the Highway, The Life of Bob Dylan, a biography from Howard Sound that was written about him in the year 2001. Desiree Gabrielle Dennis Dylan was the name of the daughter brought into the world by Dylan and Carolyn. 1986 is the year of her birth. There is little question that this specific relationship provided a complex depth to Dylan's love life, even though they divorced in the year 1992. Many times, the topics that he explored in his music were reflected in his personal life, which was full of mystery and curiosity. Because each of his relationships brought a new and distinctive facet to his songwriting, his romantic life became just as renowned as his music. Without a shadow of a doubt, Dylan's romantic life was complicated, to say the least. A distinct viewpoint on his personality is provided by his son, which reveals more facets of the nature of the music legend, this time in the role of a father figure. This information was provided by his son in an interview with the New York Times. His father was a loving father figure who had been doing his duties effectively ever since he was a youngster, according to his description of his father. During the conversation, he mentioned that when he was a child, he saw his father Dylan as a deity, particularly for the appropriate reasons. Throughout his whole life, his father has never missed any of his childhood events and has consistently shown him a great deal of affection. This aspect of Bob Dylan was independently verified by his older son Jesse after some time had passed. From the time they were children till the present day, he has remarked that his father has been a helpful and encouraging presence throughout their whole lives. It has gone further to provide a look into the guy who is behind the musical icon, and all of these personal thoughts from his children demonstrate who Dylan is when he is not in the public light. On one occasion, Dylan himself corroborated what all of his children had stated when he remarked how becoming a parent caused a transformation in his life and changed his attention away from just about everyone and everything that was going on. He went on to concede that, apart from my family, nothing piqued his attention. He said this in a second statement. Dylan emerges not just as a cultural icon, but also as a loving father whose impact stretches well beyond the worlds of music and celebrity, as seen by the sentimental stories that have been provided by his children. There have been rumors and theories brought forth regarding Dylan's erratic religious views. To have a better understanding of his religious life, Let's take a look at it. His religious life and beliefs. Among the many aspects of Bob Dylan's life that are difficult to comprehend, his spiritual path stands out as one of the most complicated. His position on religion has been characterized by several significant periods of introspection, as well as variations in his views at various points in time, as well as moments of self-discovery and personal investigation. Dylan was steeped in profound Jewish teachings from the time he was a little child. It was in May of 1954 when he celebrated his bar mitzvah as part of the Jewish tradition that his parents and extended family members were closely attached to. His parents and extended family members were firmly tied to the local Jewish customs. The purpose of this ritual was to signify his formal admission into the Jewish faith, and it is often considered to be a crucial occasion in the life of any Jewish kid. This was how Dylan felt about the situation. Dylan's spiritual journey and religious views took several surprising turns as he moved through life, regardless of where he came from. In 1971, while he was getting close to his 30th birthday, he decided to travel to Israel. It was during his time in Israel that he came into contact with Rabbi Meir Kahan, who was the one who initially established the Jewish Defense League. For him, this encounter with the rabbi was a pivotal moment in the process of re-establishing his connection to his Jewish heritage. On the other hand, following this period, he had a conversion to the Christian religion under the direction of Mary Alice Ortiz. Instantaneously, he developed a profound devotion to the concepts that were being taught at the Vineyard School of Discipleship. At that time, one of the pastors, Ken Gullickson, began offering Dylan both spiritual direction and guidance in his spiritual life. Regrettably, by the year 1984, he abruptly changed his mind and began to distance himself from the Christian faith. Instead, he decided to approach spirituality in a manner that was more personal and contemplative. It was said that he was heard underlining his opinion that life contains deeper significance that goes beyond the surface level and his belief in a higher power. Dylan was able to emphasize how his music served this function for him. During an interview with Newsweek, he also revealed his changing spiritual worldview. "I Saw the Light and Let Me Rest on a Peaceful Mountain" are two of Dylan's songs that shed light on his spiritual journey. Other songs, such as "I Saw the Light," also supplied insights. Despite the complicated spiritual life he led, it was seen that he maintained a connection to his Jewish heritage by taking part in certain of their rituals in secret. A crucial incident occurred in Bob Dylan's life that led him into the depths of contemplation. Dylan is someone who has had something for self-awareness and reflection, and this event also drew him into the depths of reflection. Let's have a closer look at the specifics. As a result of the accident, his life was altered. On the 29th of June in 1966, he was riding his motorbike in his neighborhood in Woodstock, New York, when he was engaged in a significant motorcycle accident that came dangerously close to taking his life. However, he suffered injuries that resulted in many vertebrae in his neck being shattered. This incident's specifics were not obvious to anyone about it. As further time passed, Dylan was questioned about this matter. Nevertheless, he declined to disclose any precise specifics regarding the events that transpired. Because he was unable to reveal this information to the general public, several rumors circulated, which resulted in his followers and the media world expressing a variety of perspectives over several years. His son was able to divulge the circumstances of this occurrence to a certain extent during an interview that took place many years later. He stated that the events that transpired after the accident were odd, and that he was unable to receive prompt medical assistance since there was no ambulance arriving at the scene. Because this delay occurred, Dylan was not transferred to a hospital within the shortest amount of time. During the entire process of phoning for medical assistance, there was no one accessible to come to Dylan's rescue at that moment in his life, which added to the mystery that surrounded the tragedy. A huge transformation in his profession, family, and personal life occurred as a result of this particular experience, which marked a turning point in his life and led to big changes in reflection. When all of these events were taking place, Dylan decided to take advantage of the time off and avoid being in the spotlight of the media. This period turned out to be one of introspection and complete recuperation for him. In addition to that, he utilized this time to focus on other projects. The occurrence of the accident and the subsequent recuperation were both crucial events in the life of this legendary figure in the world of music. Because of this, he was able to take some time to think about his creative talents and explore them further. which helped him enter the realm of a successful return. Regardless of the many obstacles that Bob Dylan has faced throughout his life, there is no question that he has left an indelible stamp on the annals of music history. His legacy will go on forever. Let us take a quick look at his legacy and how he has continued to have an impact on the music business. Legacy and ongoing introspection are both important. He could work on a documentary film that was based on his 1,966 trips while he was in the process of recovering from his injury. D.A. Pennebaker was the one who was able to capture this endeavor. Nevertheless, when it came time to show it to the public, ABC Television decided not to air the initial version because they believed it was too complicated for the typical viewer to understand. The fact that he was rejected added fuel to the fire of suspicion regarding his life at this time. At the point in time when he had fully healed from the accident, he decided to return to his apartment in Woodstock. Because he was able to spend a significant amount of time here, he decided to devote most of his time to recording. Both his own house and the house next door, which was dubbed Big Pink, were available to him. Dylan was able to record more than 100 songs during his time at this location. However, some of the tracks that he recorded were meant to serve as demos for other artists before this point in time. The Basement Tapes was the title of a compilation album that Columbia Records issued in 1975 when it was released. After some time had passed, in 2014, a more comprehensive edition, dubbed The Basement Tapes Complete, was made available to the public. This comprehensive version featured contributions from renowned artists such as Pete Drake, Kenny Buttrey, and Charlie McCoy. While all of these were going on, he decided to work with other musicians in Nashville to make an album that was going to be called John Wesley Harding. In particular, this album was well known for its concise pieces, which he claimed were inspired by biblical phrases and ideas in addition to the American West. All Along the Watchtower, which started receiving a lot of attention in 1967 and has since been considered one of his finest songs, was one of the songs that became extremely popular from the album. Dylan was confronted with the sad news of the passing of his mentor, Woody Guthrie, in addition to the accident and the successful music initiatives he carried out. This had a significant impact on him. By the 20th of January in 1968, he had decided to hold a memorial performance at Carnegie Hall to commemorate the influence of Woody Guthrie. After the publication of Dylan's song named Murder Most Foul in March of 2020, audiences were taken aback by the extraordinary creative abilities of Dylan. This particular song, which was based on the well-known killing of President John F. Kennedy, was 17 minutes long, in contrast to his previous songs that he had released up until this point, which were typically shorter. Dylan had a considerable level of success with this song since it landed him at the top of the rock digital music sales list on Billboard. Immediately following the announcement of that breakthrough, it was revealed that 2 new singles would be released, namely False Prophet and I Contain Multitudes. By the time June 2020 rolled around, Rough and Rowdy Ways had been released, and it quickly climbed to the top of the album list in the United Kingdom. Dylan earned the distinction of being the oldest artist to reach the top of the chart with 100% new material as a result of this remarkable accomplishment. Regrettably, by December of that same year, he decided to sell all of the rights and management associated with his entire song collection. For a total of more than $300 million, Universal Music Publishing Group purchased every one of them. In May 2021, when he became 80 years old, he conducted a virtual conference that was called Dylan 80. The conference featured several contributions from a variety of individuals, including academics, journalists, artists, and others from a variety of backgrounds. After that, in the year 2021, he was able to capture his audience with a live broadcast that lasted for 50 minutes and was dubbed Shadow Kingdom. The stream featured early songs by Bob Dylan. Following that, his bootleg series was launched, and then in September of the same year, Springtime in New York was released. All of this labor was then followed by a one-of-a-kind version of Blowing in the Wind, which was recorded utilizing the cutting-edge Ionic original media. During the auction that took place in July of 2022, this piece acquired a considerable amount of money. Every one of these is evidence of the impact and influence that Bob Dylan has established throughout his career. You should click the next video that appears on your screen, as well as like and subscribe to this video if you find it entertaining.